What is the definition of persistence? You see, this particular NSX was wrecked more than 10 years ago. For the last decade, I've been trying to get my hands on this car. Now that I have it, I have to figure out exactly what to do with it. See, this isn't just some ordinary wrecked NSX. This one, it's turbo. As far as the turbo goes, we're probably dealing with some seriously outdated technology since this thing was wrecked and parked more than a decade ago. The entire industry has had a lot of time to update technology, but as far as quality goes, the kit that is on this car looks to be very, very nice. It's amazing just kind of how small of an intercooler this thing runs. You have beautiful headers here. I'm not quite sure what brand these actually are, but very, very nice quality. You can see the turbo setup here. We have a scavenge pump that runs from the oil drain. Very, very simple. Looks to be just nice, efficient setup. Do have a little bit of oil residue we're going to have to look into amongst other things because I want to hear this thing run. You can't just go firing up a car that's been sitting for 10 years. We have lots of stuff to inspect on this to make sure that we don't have any animal type rodent issues, any dry rot issues. We know we're going to have to replace every single ounce of fluid that is in this car. Hearing this thing run for the first time in 10 years gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, but it might not matter much if there's too much damage at the front end to fix this NSX, which is why we need to dive in, get some of this mangled mess out of our way, and see if this thing can actually be repaired. Note to self, screwdrivers are not pry tools. One of the big questions on this NSX is going to be figuring out how much of the front suspension is damaged. Obviously, there's an absolutely massive amount of movement in these frame rails, but having this up in the air gives us our first real look at what the bottom side of this front suspension looks like. The first thing that's jumping out at me is you can see there's a lot of movement right here where the sway bar mounts onto this whole front assembly. You can see this is where the front of the lower control arm mounts to, and this frame rail basically collapsed right above it, around it, however you want to put it. You can see this one here on this side, the frame rail, everything is more straight, streamlined, everything just lines up a whole lot better. This thing on this side, the way the frame rail collapsed, there is just a ton of movement there. This brace support piece has just completely folded over, although the back section does look okay. One thing to note is just that this thing, to my knowledge, never went to like a Copart lot or anything like that. So the damage, the scrapes that we have under here means that this thing went over something at some point, whether it was in the accident or previously, but obviously this damage here is definitely from the accident. And speaking of Copart, you know that it's our #1 go-to source for all the types of cars that we mess with here around the shop. Whether it's a rebuild or a teardown, we've literally built 2 businesses around buying cars from Copart. From a flooded McLaren P1 to a wrecked Nissan Juke, the highest of high-performance cars and trucks are available at Copart.com. I like to use the mobile app. It comes in handy to search the inventory whenever I have some downtime. So if you're like us and you're working with champagne taste on a Kool-Aid budget, Copart is going to be the place where you can find that dream car project at a fraction of the price. On top of that, there is a discount code and a link down in the description below. You can save on your registration and start searching for that dream car project today. The only thing that I request is that you go ahead and tag us and Copart in whatever progress you make on whatever project you find yourself picking up. What are the odds this thing has coolant? Wow. That's crazy. This thing's wedged in here pretty good. I think we're gonna have to do a little framework.
Frame machine?
Uh-huh.
Oh, dang. This is the new model, too. This is a dual frame machine.
Oh, damn. Okay. This will be interesting.
Is she straight?
Almost. You gotta hammer down on it.
Perfect. I'm doing a little bit of straightening as I go here. This side still needs a whole lot more work, but I think we've kind of reached a stopping point for as much as we can take off on the front end here. I'm noticing the more I get apart, just the deeper the damage goes on these frame rails, the little bit of suspension damage that we highlighted earlier. But in order to get the look that I want on this front end, to finally figure out exactly how deep the damage goes, we need to take off a lot of this wiring, pull it back further into the cabin. But if we do that, we're not going to be able to fire this thing up. Our problem is that a car sitting for 10 years, it opens up the door for a lot of potential issues, things that we need to address before we can fire this thing up and hear it run for the first time in more than a decade. Go ahead and do oil first. That really doesn't look too bad at all. I don't know what exactly I expected 10-year-old engine oil to look like, but this looks like just normal engine oil. Oh wow, that looks brand new. Even though it looks fresh, you can almost feel it feels like watery, like it just doesn't feel like oil normally does. It doesn't have that kind of just thick kind of consistency to it. So even though it looks good, I think that this stuff is definitely not good. One thing that I absolutely love about 90s era Japanese cars is that pretty much all of them have a drain on the fuel tank, at least in my experience. So really, we're going to wait for this to stop draining, and then I guess we need to put this down and figure out how much fuel it has in it before we go ahead and pop that open. I don't know if you need power for the fuel gauge. Oh no. That thing is completely full. Oh man. Oh no. I don't know what size tank this thing has, but I have to assume it's at least 15 gallons, which means we're going to need several buckets, because this gas that's going to come out of this is probably going to be some of the worst any of us have ever seen. this isn't as bad as I thought. I thought this stuff was going to be like neon orange, but the smell is ridiculous. In my defense, I do think that this could have gone worse, but the important thing is that we got most of the fuel out of the tank. Now we need to get a look inside and see what that looks like. Got some nice new stains on the floor. Okay. That actually looks really good, except for whatever that is up at the top. Let me see if I can get my angle. That doesn't look like rust, though. That looks like some sort of maybe like deposits, or maybe the old fuel kind of like stripped the lining on the tank. Let me get a different angle here. That is the strainer basket. That all looks really, really good. And again, it's just the top of the tank. We might have lucked out as much fuel as this thing had in it, because it might have actually protected the tank to a certain degree, except for whatever those like deposits at the top are. But at the same time, this is a 30-year-old tank. The fact that it's sat for 10 years, I don't think really affects it too much, considering that these can have major rust issues just because they're so old. But that is better than I was expecting. So we've got fresh 93 fuel in this and some fresh oil. The last thing I want to do before we give this a legitimate shot at turning over for the first time is unhook all of these injectors, and then I've also unhooked the return line that is coming from the pressure regulator. And what that will allow us to do is verify that the pump is indeed working, make sure nothing weird comes out of this that's been sitting in there for however many years, and then also give the motor a chance to prime with oil. If all of those things check out, then we'll plug these back in and see if this thing fires up.
It's pushing fuel.
I hear the pump running.
I mean, it's pushing.
Nothing weird coming out.
Nope, looks clean.
Sounds good. All right. We got nothing else holding us back. All right, here goes nothing. First time in 10 years. Come on, baby. Or maybe not. Try one more time.
Got no gas on it.
Oh, it's got gas in it. It's just a matter of it's making it to the cylinders. All right, we got more work to do. My first inclination is that the culprit here is going to be these injectors. These have not been fired in 10 years. I'm going to guess that every single one of them is stuck shut. I got Tim here. We are going to go through, crank this thing over, and see if we have a pulse to know that the ECU is trying to fire the injector.
Yep. Good. We got pulse.
We have two options here before we go ahead and pull these injectors to either be cleaned or replaced. We're going to spray some brake clean into the intake track. If the motor tries to kick over, then we know that there's some sort of issue there. On the fueling side, if that is the indication, then we are going to try to tap on the injectors. We might be able to get them to free up, but I'm thinking that we're probably going to have to remove them, send them out to be cleaned, or replace them.
It says flammable on it. You, sir, have a fuel injector issue.
All right, here we go.
Fire in the hole.
Hey, it worked! No way! That idle is like a normal Honda thing, right? Like the fluctuating idle? That's
Pretty
normal.
much, yeah. The idle air control valve or whatever it is.
A little bit of smoke. I'm not gonna leave it running long because it's got no coolant in it. Oh, that's from the breather, okay.
Yeah, this thing smells horrible.
Hasn't been started in 10 years, guaranteed. Not bad, not bad, all right. Shut her down. All right, we know it runs though. How rewarding it is to hear this thing fire up for the first time in more than a decade. Unfortunately, it was a little bit short-lived because we just don't have any coolant in this system. And unfortunately, my excitement is a little bit short-lived as well. When I went to look at what was going to be needed to rig the factory radiator that I picked up used up into this car just so we could fill it up to drive it, I also came to the realization that it has absolutely no brake fluid in it. Luckily, I planned on replacing the old, outdated, extremely heavy factory ABS unit with a newer S2000 style ABS unit system. But the problem is when I removed it, I realized how many steps backwards we were going to go if I put that in, bled it just for some sort of temporary test drive. It really is going to be short-lived. Like, there's too much work that needs to be done to do that, to then just take it back apart so we can do the front end fabrication on it. So unfortunately, I think logic is going to prevail in this case, and we're going to just have to go ahead, keep tearing this thing down. We have a very short amount of time before it has to go to Josh's for the front end fabrication, and we have a lot of work left to do.
There's a bracket we're missing.
Yeah.
There's got to be a metal bracket that goes between them.
I think there's a bracket. Look at like that inside on that line right there. Are you relatively lined up right now?
I'm on it right now.
Yeah. So I think we're okay. I just think that
Okay.
the bottoms of these. I mean, like I'm literally yanking mine out. Like it's gonna have to come.
I can pull mine out a little bit.
Okay.
Good. Your side first.
And just watch your fender, all those gaps.
Yep.
It's just pretty wide.
Huge. Is yours tight?
So it's getting tight at the
It's
front.
getting tight at the front.
Yeah. So
It's not touching that.
Mine is, I think the gaps are at least Okay. Well, I think that's a good thing because we said that the fronts need to come out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, go ahead. Just let it sit. It's gonna.
Yeah.
So it's gonna dip down.
Yeah.
But all of this is actually like.
Yeah. These lines.
This is actually
Same brand?
relatively. Yeah, this is relatively close here. I am actually shocked how well all of this appears to be lining up. The gaps, they definitely aren't perfect. There's some little imperfections, as you can see. It's not quite even right now. It still gets a little bit tight here at the front, but for some aftermarket carbon fenders and a carbon hood, I think that we are moving in the right direction, especially considering how much damage we have at the front. You can see the hood's just a little bit high. The curvature is just a little bit off, and then the only gap that I'm really unhappy with is right back here. It actually gets tight and is completely not even with the rest of the door gap here. But my plan is to paint these fenders. We're probably going to go ahead and leave the hood in the gloss open carbon fiber. Then I have some additions for the back of the car that will tie in the carbon fiber a little bit better. This front bumper, I do have the lower section that is already painted red, but it does look like we are missing some brackets here on the side that are going to make it so we can actually mount this bumper to this fender. Over here on the driver's side, we have pretty well the same thing going on where all of the gaps are pretty good. There's a little bit extra right there, and this fender is just a tad bit low here at the top. I did have to make major changes to this mount point that is right here that we will 100% finish up and make sure that it attaches properly when it comes back from fabrication. For this thing to go from sitting for 10 years to starting on its own and have most of these front end body panels fitted with just a couple days worth of work, I think is major strides forward to getting this NSX back on the road. From this point though, I'm gonna need to recruit some help. If you've been around the channel for a little while, you know that our master fabricator Josh up at JCH Weld Fab is who we're going to be taking this thing to, so that way we can get the entire front end structure, new frame rails, all welded on, bolted in place, and we're going to get the structure at the front end of this car back how it needs to be, and that will give us all of our mount points for the rest of the body panel. That will have to wait until episode 2 though. We are going to be waiting on those parts for a little bit, and we have to give Josh some time to work his handiwork at the front end of the car here, but hopefully you are just as excited as I am to see this thing on the road for the first time in more than 10 years. I can literally hear the turbo noises in my head, and I can't wait to rip this thing on the streets. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. It's going to be updates on this very, very soon, as well as all the other projects we have going on. See you in the next video. Whoops.